For years, Joni Lamb has been the focus of rumors, but nobody anticipated this. Perry Stone has revealed startling new information that is rocking the Christian community to its foundation in a startling turn of events. His statement is not a theory. Everything we believe to be true has turned out to be incorrect. Everyone was kept in the dark about the truth, but now that it's out, there could be serious consequences. Be careful. This is only the beginning. It caught everyone off guard. For many years, Joni Lamb was regarded as a trustworthy individual in the Christian radio and television industry. She was one of the founders of Daystar Television Network, together with her late husband Marcus Lamb. They later turned it into one of the world's largest Christian media networks. Her appearance was neat, refined, and profoundly spiritual. She represented security, trust, and loyalty to millions of people. However, things changed when Perry Stone raised his voice. One of the most well-known figures in prophetic ministry, Perry Stone, made a startling public statement on Joni Lamb. It astonished online Christian communities, churches, and ministries. He wasn't just doubting her leadership skills. He painted a picture of Daystar's manipulation, control, and the holding of power. According to Stone, Joni wasn't merely a depressed widow continuing her husband's work or a background supporter. She was the leader. He spoke in a straightforward, frightening manner. He said that Joni used her wealth to dictate Daystar's spiritual journey. The topics being spoken over the air, not only the commercial aspect. He claimed that when it came to programming, she chose what was best for herself, supporting some groups while excluding others. The faith was no longer the issue. It was a power issue. Because of that, Christians felt unsure about what to do. This was no stranger's grievance. Perry Stone, who had developed a sizable fan base from his numerous appearances on Daystar, said these things. When he made these accusations, people paused and listened. They couldn't take it back after they did. Some started asking difficult questions after watching Daystar for years. Were their perceptions of Joni Lamb incorrect? Was the network still a place of faith, or had it evolved into something else? Numerous people were conversing in churches, prayer groups, and internet forums. It was viewed as a moral betrayal by some. They believed in Joni. They had welcomed her into their houses. They now learned that it could have all been a faked photo. The reaction was powerful. Some longtime Joni supporters immediately backed her, claiming the accusations were untrue, envious, or just unclear. A few weren't certain. They have to be aware. They wanted to make everything clear. Many individuals were simply depressed because they couldn't decide between two leaders they had once admired. The fact that Joni remained silent was even worse. When the news broke, she took a while to respond. Nobody tried to explain it, denied it, or said anything. For different people, that silence signified different things. It was referred to as honor by some. Some believed it to be guilt. Either way, the harm was done. Perry Stone's remarks were the ones that made the most impact. Additionally, a wave of skepticism swept through the Christian media landscape. Many people now have a different perspective on Daystar. Before becoming embroiled in one of the worst scandals in Christian radio history, Joni Lamb was seen as a humble, devoted rock star. From a single word, it had expanded into something far larger. Trust, faith, and guidance are all in full force. Things rapidly collapsed after Perry Stone's allegations were made public. The background chatter that had been quiet became a raging storm. Christians in the media, mostly those who had worked closely with Daystar, were less likely to remain silent. The Joni Lamb that people had grown to appreciate didn't sound like the stories they recounted. For many years, Joni was viewed as Daystar's helping wife and co-founder. She supported Marcus Lamb during all of his lectures, broadcasts, and network expansions. After he passed away, the majority believed she was merely preserving his concept. However, former employees and behind-the-scenes workers claimed Joni wasn't merely continuing Marcus's work. She was in charge, that's correct. Little things were the first. The programs had changed, and people noticed. A few speakers were not invited to return. Some topics were dropped from conversation. Over time, patterns started to emerge. It appeared that ministries who shared Joni's values and beliefs received greater support, attention, and airtime from the network. Slowly, those who didn't match the model or didn't agree with them left the organization. Then there were financial reports. Some individuals began discussing how Joni changed Daystar and possibly other organizations with her money. She was able to receive large sums of money from both the network and other donors. Some said that she used those cash just to support the opinions she wished to hear. Others believed she struck arrangements behind the scenes to maintain her position of authority. Even the use of offshore accounts, untraceable presence, and rewarding devoted supporters with cash were discussed. Nothing was released to the public, and there was no official verification. However, several individuals questioned whether it was more than rumors because so many others shared the same accounts. One thing was clear to all: Joni was tremendously powerful. People started to realize that Joni's connections were not limited to Daystar, they extended much beyond the network. She has long maintained friendships with prominent ministry heads, corporate executives, and politicians. She may have done so by influencing other Christian TV networks, influencing public opinion during elections, and protecting herself from criticism by supporting powerful allies, according to several of her close associates. The possibility that Daystar's content, such as the interviews, worship music, and sermons, could not have been as authentic as people believed was sure to disturb a lot of people. Was there a single somebody behind the scenes, making their own plans? I was struck by that thought. Instead of hearing a professionally crafted message intended to assist someone in achieving their own personal objectives, those who tuned in hoped to hear God's words. Some guests were allegedly prevented from returning to the network by Joni. They didn't align with her vision for Daystar, but they weren't opposed to the Bible either. According to those accounts, if you weren't on her side, you weren't on the air. That's simple. Preachers who had previously collaborated with Daystar started to subtly verify some of these suspicions. They each shared a story about being granted airtime and then abruptly being dropped without explanation. Some claimed that in order to stay up with the network, they felt compelled to alter their speech. No one told them directly, but they knew what to say. Clear up. Never doubt the story. Ensure Joni is happy. If you didn't, you were out. Because this was about more than simply programs, even who supported Joni began to feel uneasy. It was a power issue. Who decides what is heard and seen by millions of people? Who has the authority to decide what spiritual messages are given to individuals and churches? More and more individuals realized that Joni's involvement had gone too far. According to some first-hand reports, Joni disliked it when others disagreed with her. They claimed that she only surrounded herself with a select few advisors and employees she trusted, and that anyone who raised too many concerns was promptly dismissed. According to one former employee, the atmosphere at Daystar evolved over time. It was like family, they remarked. Joni's accession to the throne made it feel like a nation. More folks were joining in. Longtime viewers and those who have previously worked for or with Daystar have reported feeling that the video's tone has slightly changed. They discussed feeling that something wasn't quite right. The sermons were less gruff and more fluid. Interviews seemed more organized and safer. Some claimed that the spirit was no longer present in the same manner. A far larger question resulted from all of this. Was Joni Lamb running a media empire built on wealth, influence, and well-crafted messaging, or was he leading a church? It's difficult to ask someone who has spent decades establishing a reputation as a servant of God. But everyone had to respond to that question. It wasn't just foreigners who inquired. Pastors, church leaders, worship artists, and ordinary Christians were among those who had grown up watching Daystar. The more people examined, the more trends they noticed, and the more Joni remained silent, the more conjecture there was. The fact that she didn't respond to many of them was bothersome. If these things aren't true, why not tell the truth? Why don't you be honest and confront the lies head-on? It was obvious that things had changed, but she continued as though nothing had. Opening a curtain was how one might describe the Perry Stone moment. People realized that there was more than one influential individual. Many believed that the system was accustomed to operating without accountability. Whether it was fair or not, Joni was now the public face of that system. Since then, people have continued to discuss it. For many years, Joni Lamb was viewed as a loving, loyal leader who took up her husband's role. However, that image is now irrevocably altered. In addition to creating waves, Perry Stone's accusations against Joni Lamb sent a massive shockwave across the Christian community. There was more than one story. People's reactions were swift, intense, and highly divided, and it was a true disaster. One group supported Joni and put up a valiant fight to keep her safe. The opposing side was incredulous, incensed, and curious about what was happening. Suddenly there were no sides left. Individuals have to decide between responsibility and loyalty. Many longtime viewers and fans of Daystar were taken aback by the announcement. For years, they prayed with Joni and attended church together. They had faith in the service she helped create as well. Some individuals attended gatherings, gave her money, or even shared her remarks with their friends and family. They now believed that she might have been misusing their confidence to achieve her goals. It was illogical. They were taken by surprise, perplexed, and even duped. For them, this meant more than that. For me, it was a crisis of faith. Social media exploded. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook became battlegrounds for people on both sides. Some believed that Joni was being assaulted spiritually, so they wrote prayers for her and her family. Some were unreserved in their criticism of her, labeling her dishonest, manipulative, and selfish. Hashtags gained popularity. There were legitimate concerns as well as conspiracy theories. It got worse with every new YouTube video, comment, and post. Additionally, there were films featuring excerpts from Perry Stone's lectures, the reactions of preachers, analysis from prominent figures, and testimonials from former Daystar employees. It was all over. Suddenly, the topic of conversation in church groups was Joni Lamb. It was challenging to discern what was real and what wasn't, as well as the implications for Christian media going forward. Where people stood in prayer groups and churches was equally obvious. Several leaders advised patience. In their words, "We don't know the whole story yet. Let's pray before we pass judgment." Others were more straightforward. If even half of this is accurate, we have a serious issue with Christian leadership. Because they were unsure of what to believe, the members were silent. Some were too afraid to discuss it at all. It was difficult to grasp and overly weird. The response from the Christian media was distinct. When reporting on the story, religious news websites used caution. Although they were aware of the charges, they concentrated on the lives that Daystar has transformed in Joni's many years of service. They discussed it as an agonizing experience, a potential error, or an opportunity to reflect and recover. Some even went so far as to advise people to remain united and not dismantle the body of Christ. However, when non-Christians were around, the tone changed. Investigative reporters and the secular media covered it extensively. The headlines utilized words like scandal, corruption, and uncovered. Everything started to make sense in articles. Daystar's wealth, Joni's influence, and ancient legends that have never been revealed before. Using this event as evidence that awful things happen when too much authority is given to the wrong individuals, several internet and documentary media even questioned the televangelism model as a whole. They were investigating the entire system rather than merely writing about Joni. Conversely, Joni Lamb remained silent. There was a lot to that stillness. Her admirers interpreted it as a show of courage. They declared, "She's not going to participate in rumors." She was viewed as cowardly by some, who said, "She's letting God fight her battles." "Why isn't she saying anything?" they inquired. "Why does she not deny it?" They stated she should speak up if she wasn't guilty. Those who were unsure of what to do became anxious. As time passed, people started to question more and more about Joni. Furthermore, given the amount of news that is out there these days, silence just serves to magnify a narrative. The riddle became part of the controversy. Daystar was hardly a quiet place either. Rumor had it that the team was divided. There were many that adored Joni and were always there for her. Others began searching for escape routes because they no longer trusted the leaders or were scared of their names. While some former employees came out anonymously, others did so in public, sharing anecdotes that supported the initial charges. In addition to having power, Joni made terrible use of it. Anything she didn't like vanished, and anyone she didn't trust vanished as well. "We all felt like we had to be careful not to make any mistakes," remarked another. "You were out after one bad move." These kinds of stories exacerbated the situation. Those who genuinely wanted to assume Joni was innocent had to pause and reflect. There were far too many warning signs and similar statements. The romance ended abruptly. Many people, however, remained steadfast. They pointed out that Perry Stone had previously struggled with his own issues. They wanted to know what he was doing. "Why now?" they inquired. "Why spread the word about this? Is it looking for blood? Is it related to you?" Some claimed that he was attempting to overthrow a female leader because he was envious or proud of her. They claimed that Joni had always been a good servant, that the accusations were untrue, and that the ministry's actions spoke louder than any gossip. This caused a significant rift within the Christian community in addition to dividing public opinion. It caused me to consider some difficult topics. What do we think? How do we respond to scandals involving power? What do we do when a service we value is under trouble? Churches were filled with silent conversations. The ministries started reviewing their own policies and procedures. In order to avoid taking sides, several preachers even brought up the issue in their sermons. Instead, they discussed the dangers of unbridled authority, the value of transparency, and the necessity of holding even well-liked leaders accountable. Daystar's scores started to shift. A few viewers shut down the entire network. Those who were paying closer attention wanted to know how the government would handle the situation or to hear back. Behind the scenes, sponsors and donors started to ask questions. Everywhere there was increasing pressure. Throughout it all, the news continued to follow. The reporters continued to search. Social media and people remained vocal. The idea that a house of worship could have become something else filled some with optimism, some with rage, and some with shattered hearts. The altercation was detrimental to more than just Joni Lamb's reputation. Something deeper was broken. The notion that evil cannot hurt Christian leaders. It served as a reminder that no one is exempt from accountability, regardless of their level of holiness or length of service. This media frenzy ultimately accomplished more than anything else with that message. Not only was the outcry against Perry Stone strong, but it was also hungry. What started out as a startling remark swiftly expanded into something much more significant. Joni Lamb was no longer the only focus. It was about faith, accomplishing goals, and seeing how ineffective things are, even in ministries that appear to be powerful on the outside. Once it was all done, it was evident that not only had someone been severely harmed, but also a whole network, an audience, and a religious community. Joni Lamb spent many years working on Daystar with her late husband. It had developed into one of the world's most significant locations for Christian media. Every week, a great number of people watched. In their homes, churches, and hospital rooms, people sought inspiration, guidance, and serenity. All of these locations were impacted by the network. Daystar was viewed by many as a spiritually significant connection. Joni was much than just a TV host to those individuals. She was like a mother in the faith. The damage was severe because of this. This has nothing to do with a celebrity. Because they trusted that individual with their spiritual lives, people watched. Daystar was in serious jeopardy when the allegations were made public. People began to watch less. Those who had been observing for a long time stopped because they were unsure of their thoughts. Former donors and supporters of the ministry grew increasingly cautious. A few folks paused their conversation. A few strolled away in silence. Nobody wanted to be a part of a scandal, particularly one that raised doubts about the integrity of the entire enterprise. Suddenly, Daystar's image as a place of unflinching trust was under attack. Things were becoming more difficult behind the scenes. the employees were divided. Because they believed Joni had been misunderstood or falsely accused, some individuals continued to support her. Some began to voice their opinions or simply left, particularly those who had been supervised by her for a considerable amount of time. Executive perplexity, internal conflicts, and resignation rumors were all prevalent in the company's hallways. The network, which had been renowned for its unity, was suddenly tense. The structure itself was also a place of little trust. In public, Joni continued to be reticent most of the time. She attended a couple of events. She continued to perform, but she didn't directly address the accusations. Many believed that the words were not as powerful as the quiet. Since they had nothing to offer in response to the threats, some referred to it as strength. People became even more skeptical because some said it was an error. It needed to be made clear. Instead, they received well-thought-out public gatherings and encouraging speeches, but the actual questions were never addressed. However, Joni wasn't the only person under stress. The heat spread throughout the Christian TV and radio industry. Other ministries and networks began to examine their own leadership structures and financial management. The question of whether this may occur elsewhere was raised. Were other leaders overly powerful and unchecked? Was this the start of something far more significant? Like a tsunami, doubts started to spread. Many ministries that had never been questioned before became the subject of extensive interrogation. It was interpreted as a warning by some. They believed that the church had lost sight of being truthful, modest, and helpful in favor of controlling and enhancing its image, particularly in the media. Changes, greater control, greater transparency, and less reliance on charismatic individuals at the top were among the demands they made. Instead of just growing larger, they wanted companies to return to their roots and help people. Back at Daystar, there was more discussion about replacing the leadership. Some others with knowledge of the matter believed that Joni ought to resign, if only temporarily, to allow for healing and improvement. Some believed that her removal would worsen the situation. That it would further weaken the network's unity and create a leadership gap that no one was prepared to cover. You were forced to make difficult choices in every aspect. There was no simple solution. Experts in law also began to speak up. If even a few of the accusations were accurate, the consequences may be dire. Daystar may be subject to penalties, investigations, or possibly license suspensions for its broadcasting. That made everything even more challenging. People's opinions were no longer the only consideration. It was about lawfully surviving.